in life and in death. We give you glory, Mother Miranda.
Resident Evil Village is the sequel to Resident Evil that came out in 2017. Apparently there are other games in the series, but who really cares about that? Once again you play as Ethan Winters, who this time gets kidnapped to a strange village, where he finds some excuse to kill a bunch of monsters. I played Resident Evil 2017 not that long ago, but the side effect of working too much is that you get brain damage, so I can barely remember the details anymore. I remember that I thought it was decent. It was very atmospheric and had some nice bosses in it. It had too much chasing in it though, and the combat suffered from poor enemy variety. Now after finishing Village, I think that I can describe this game in a very similar way. The scope is a bit bigger and there is less chasing, thank God, but it is very much more of the same. I am seeing that some people are comparing it to Resident Evil 4, which is odd to me. Sure, there are some superficial similarities.
Thank you for your patronage.
And some minor stuff have been taken from Resident Evil 4. But the gameplay is just nothing like Resident Evil 4. Resident Evil 4 was an action game all the way through, and Village is simply not. Sure, Village have some areas that are pure action, but half the game is cutscenes, walking sim gameplay and scripted set pieces. It is the sequel to Resident Evil 7 in more than name, and while it leans more on the action side of things, I still think it is the same formula. I am getting ahead of myself, but expectations are important. Anyway, Village is in general a decent looking game. It doesn't blow me away or anything like that, but it has some nice looking environments and character models. It is not consistently good looking though, and some stuff looks old. The enemies, for instance, have static death animations.
How embarrassing.
Which makes it look like a game from 15 years ago. The blood effects are also a big step down from the remake games, and it is not impressive at all. You might notice that the footage is a bit choppy, and this is due to a combination of crappy optimization, issues with alt-tabbing, and ray tracing. There is no way that I am turning off ray tracing, considering how much my man-child graphic card cost. I don't want to go on a tangent, but ray tracing is a joke. and is either barely noticeable or runs like dogshit. I also find it amazing that I jumped up 3 generations of graphic cards and still have issues running multiple games on 1080p 60 FPS. It is almost like it is just a never-ending scam with increasingly expensive hardware being hyped up by shills who don't actually play games to run increasingly poorly optimized games. Well, at least I'm not dumb enough to have fallen for the 4K shills. I'm also not dumb enough to fall for this game's dumb story. This is certainly a story where you shouldn't overthink the little details, and I am completely fine with that. If I complete an ancient ritual and a stone bridge is raised from the water to take me to a modern factory, then that is really stupid, but whatever. I can ignore this. What I can't ignore is that the core of the story is nonsensical and incoherent. I am fine with mold magic being wacky, but when I don't understand what is going on and Ethan doesn't react in a believable manner, then it is all just a big moldy mess. There is also a lack of characters in general. Important characters get very little screen time, and many characters are introduced to just get killed off for shock value. The game is not as bad as, say, the Wolfenstein games when it comes to shock value in cutscenes, but it feels a bit cheap when Ethan will have his hands mutilated for the 10th time. With all of this being said, Village have plenty of atmospheric cutscenes and good scenes, but considering how much time you spend in cutscenes and slow walking, it would have been nice if the game could have delivered a little bit more than cool cutscenes. I remember Resident Evil 7 pulling that off. If we get to the gameplay, then it is still made up by the same components as 7, except that the focus has been moved from horror to action and exploration. I remember Resident Evil 7 being quite scary at times, and this rarely happened in Village. Sure, there are exceptions, but if a chicken shit like me barely gets scared, then I don't think it is a very scary game. One reason is surely that all the combat, loot and plentiful ammo will put you in a more aggressive mindset, but I also think it is a general lack of spookiness combined with the game blowing its load too early in terms of enemy variety and over-the-top action. Enemies will be less scary if you have already killed them by the dozens after all. Speaking of the combat, it is alright, but it is not great. The enemies are really bullet spongy, and combined with the crappy blood effect mentioned earlier, it makes the guns feel weak and boring. The weapon variety is also okay at best, and I would have preferred to have more types of weapons instead of many different shotguns and pistol types. The biggest issue that I have with the combat though is the enemy variety. It is really poor, and you will almost have seen it all very early in the game. At the very least, I would expect each boss to introduce some new enemy types, but they don't. The combat is still alright, and for the most part it is saved by the game's atmosphere, but it is not impressive, and the game's combat-heavy sections really suffer because of this. Thankfully, the combat is spread out by the exploration and puzzles. I liked exploring these nice-looking environments, and there is enough freedom and optional areas to keep me interested. The loot is never all that interesting though, and the merchants rarely have anything fun to sell, but I still like the inclusion of these elements. The puzzles in the game are very simplistic though, and as a big-brained point-and-click player, I would have liked them to be a bit more interesting. But you can't get everything that you want. We don't have that many fun monster games, for some reason, and beggars can't be choosers. Village delivers a decent mix of horror, action and exploration, and while nothing stands out as being truly great, the possible exception being the nice castle level, it still delivers enough to keep me engaged. But I would still like there to be more though. Village is not a long game, and considering its short length, it is not as varied as it should be. This is a full-priced game from a big publisher, and there really isn't that much content in it. I have heard multiple people talking about replaying this game, which makes no sense to me. I know that Resident Evil fans are weirdos, but a game with this much cutscenes, slow walking and poor variety is certainly not made for repeat playthroughs. With all of this being said, if you like this type of game, then I would certainly recommend it, especially when it gets cheaper. But don't expect too much.